On this Friday night, state of emergency. An Ontario First Nation sounds the alarm over a cancer-causing chemical.
It feels like an attack on our community.
It calls to crack down on the company accused of causing the emissions. Air Canada apology. A flight crew accused of mishandling a sacred First Nations headdress.
And they started putting garbage bags on it. Like, you can't make this stuff up.
The response from passengers and the Prime Minister. Student showdown.
Brick by brick, wall by wall.
The pro-Palestinian movement at American universities grows larger, sparking more clashes on campus. Plus, rare breed.
These ponies were here and living in the forest prior to colonization.
An Ottawa farm celebrates the arrival of an Ojibway spirit horse.
Global National with Farah Nasser. Reporting tonight, Jeff Semple.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. The Ontario First Nation of Aamjiwnaang is under a state of emergency. It was declared in response to high levels of benzene, a cancer-causing chemical, in the air. As we've been reporting, that community is surrounded by industrial plants and has been exposed to high levels of benzene for weeks. Residents there say it's making people sick. The plant accused of causing the emissions is temporarily shutting down. But as Carolyn Jarvis reports, some residents say they have no choice but to leave.
This is my room for the night.
When Samantha Brissett got the news her First Nation had declared a state of emergency, in an hour she had packed up and was gone.
I posted on asking any of my friends if they would take in me, my boyfriend, and my dog and 2 cats, so we could get out of that air.
A hotel in the nearby village of Point Edward became her refuge and that of countless others.
This little guy lives in North Aamjiwnaang?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so you've all evacuated for the night?
Yes.
The north side of Aamjiwnaang, where Samantha lives, lies directly across from a chemical company called Ineos Styrolution. And while there are many industrial plants in the area which pollute, Ontario's Ministry of the Environment stated previously, Ineos is the primary source of significant levels of benzene, a cancer-causing chemical. The annual average limit for benzene in Ontario is 0.45 micrograms per cubic meter. There is no hourly limit. At noon on Thursday, the monitor right across the street from the plant reached the highest 1-hour level seen all month, 191.3. At 4 p.m., it climbed again to 131.7. Among those who fled, Jason Plain.
It feels like an attack on our community. It is sad.
After an outcry from residents last week, Ineos said it would temporarily shut down for maintenance and to address a mechanical issue. On Thursday, the company issued an alert that elevated levels of benzene may occur during the various stages of shutdown, but not this high.
I was literally just there with my dog. I started kind of freaking out in a way because that's a high level.
While all of this was unfolding, representatives from Aamjiwnaang were in Ottawa at an international summit on plastic pollution.
It's worth mentioning that the environment I live in is a result of inadequate regulations, monitoring, and enforcement.
Ontario's Ministry of the Environment issued a provincial order to Ineos 1 week ago to investigate the benzene leak and notify the public of any high levels.
One fear is developing cancer without even knowing I have it.
But after years of exposure to pollution from multiple industrial plants, there is little sense in Aamjiwnaang the government is protecting their health. Carolyn Jarvis, Global News, Toronto.
Air Canada is apologizing after the Assembly of First Nations National Chief says her ceremonial headdress was mishandled during a flight. On Wednesday, the Air Canada crew told Chief Cindy Woodhouse Nepinak that she could not bring her headdress on board the flight. She says the sacred item was unceremoniously wrapped in a plastic bag and sent to the cargo hold. Melissa Ridgen reports on the incident and the reaction from fellow passengers.
Frequent air travel is part of the job for politicians. Assembly of First Nations National Chief Cindy Woodhouse Nepinak is no different, having racked up her share of airtime since being elected in December, usually with this headdress in tow, a gift from the Blackfoot Confederacy, either stored overhead or under her feet.
I put my headdress with me under the seat in front of me. Standard.
But on a flight from Montreal to Fredericton this week, it wasn't.
The stewardess came and said, "You're not going to leave that there." And then she took it from me.
Staff insisted the sacred item be stowed in cargo. And adding insult,
and they started putting garbage bags on it. Like, you can't make this stuff up.
Air Canada tells Global News the bags were used to protect the case from rain. They've apologized and say the matter is under review and they will do better.
This was a mistake that I know Air Canada is looking into right now. It is an unfortunate situation that I hope is going to lead to a bit of learning, not just by Air Canada, but a lot of different institutions.
I'm glad it happened to me and not to somebody else. Like, I can't imagine how people would feel in that situation.
Woodhouse Nepinak sees a silver lining in the ordeal, fellow passengers who tried to intervene.
Canadians did step forward and they were trying to help, and I really appreciate that. And to all of them that were on the plane, miigwech, thank you from the bottom of our hearts.
Melissa Ridgen, Global News, Winnipeg.
Breaking news from the U.S., where Columbia University's Senate has called for an investigation into that school's leadership. It comes after the university's president brought in police to remove pro-Palestinian student protesters. In its resolution, the Senate says that move undermined the rights and academic freedoms of students and faculty members. The vote was held after more protests erupted outside the campus gates today, with pro-Israeli demonstrators making their voices heard. There are fears of more clashes as those demonstrations spread across the country. Neethu Garcha reports.
With keffiyehs around their necks and signs on tents, the pro-Palestinian movement sweeping campuses across the U.S. has reached the nation's capital, with passionate demonstrations at George Washington University.
Brick by brick, wall by wall, the occupation's bound to fall.
The now fenced-off encampment of students, faculty, and advocates continued after university officials set a 7 p.m. deadline on the protest. They're asking their universities to drop direct investments in companies doing business in or with Israel, including Amazon, Google, and Microsoft.
We don't want our money to be directly funding a genocide, and we don't want a blood degree after we graduate.
Protesters here say they don't intend to back down and are prepared to get arrested at this demonstration just a few blocks away from the White House, which has rejected the Republican House Speaker's demand to bring in the National Guard to put an end to these protests. Police confronted demonstrators at multiple campuses, deploying a stun gun at Emory University in Atlanta. This moment recorded by CNN crews, a shout of "I'm a professor" as an Emory University lecturer was forcefully taken to the ground during her arrest. Tensions are boiling over at the University of Southern California, students reacting after safety concerns led to the unprecedented move of canceling the main graduation ceremony.
They weren't very clear at any point with what the exact security concerns were.
There were dozens of arrests at Indiana University, where some protesters, including professors, have been banned from the campus for a year. What they say is free speech, some Jewish students say is hate speech.
Freedom of speech is very important, and I'm very for that, but I think there is a point where the university itself has a duty to protect all of its students, including the Jewish ones.
I'm here to tell them that us Jews, we will not back down, we will not be afraid, and we will not be silent.
Security is being ramped up at Columbia University, seen as the epicenter of the movement and the source of inspiration for the latest encampment in D.C. Neethu Garcha, Global News, Washington.
The American protests are now inspiring similar demonstrations in Europe, with students in France blocking access to the Paris Institute of Political Studies. Dozens occupied the main buildings on campus, while others faced off with pro-Israeli demonstrators. Police in Berlin also cleared a protest camp set up in front of German parliament. Activists there demanding an end to arms shipments for the Israeli military. The UN is calling for an urgent, independent investigation into 2 mass graves found at Gaza hospitals. Palestinian officials are exhuming what they say are hundreds of bodies found after Israeli forces withdrew. Now, Israel is denying allegations that its military was responsible. That grisly discovery comes as the world waits for Israel's ground assault on Rafah. Crystal Gamansing reports, and a warning that some of the content is graphic.
As shovels strike the ground and expose remains, unearthing the facts here will be a challenge. A mass grave was identified inside Nasser Medical Complex, says this Palestinian civil defense official in the Hamas-run government, adding it was located after people reported not being able to find those they buried. The remains of nearly 200 people have been exhumed so far. There are reports some of the bodies were bound with their hands tied, putting a spotlight on Israel Defense Forces, who up until recently were conducting operations around the hospital. Israeli military officials deny having anything to do with the mass grave, saying there were graves at the site previously. It's not known if graves were added before the IDF pulled out of the area.
We are horrified of reports of the mass graves, and we Save the Children are calling for an urgent independent investigation.
We're absolutely shocked at the destruction here.
Sasha Myers and her team from Save the Children were not able to access the gravesite at the hospital on her recent trip from Rafah to Han Yunis. She says the utter destruction she did see and the disregard for human life leaves her speechless. Myers says people are facing a lack of food, water, sanitation, and the ability to see a future.
They're just focused on surviving the next day, the next hour, the next week, and helping their children to survive. They just can't even see beyond that at the moment. It's just survival.
Survival is the goal, but it's not guaranteed. After burying his brother and sister-in-law, he also buried the couple's premature baby girl. Baby Sabrine was brought into this world with extraordinary efforts, delivered by emergency cesarean section and resuscitated after her mother was killed in an airstrike last weekend in Rafah. A bit of hope that turned into another goodbye. Crystal Gamansing, Global News, London.
An update now on the Montreal family who received the wrong body after their loved one died overseas. 68-year-old Faraj Jarjour died of a heart attack during a family vacation to Cuba last month. And last Friday, the family went to collect his remains and were horrified to discover they belonged to a much younger Russian man. The family has now learned Jarjour's body was mistakenly sent to Russia and then buried there. Global Affairs Canada is working with the family, as well as with Russian diplomatic officials, to locate, exhume, and repatriate the remains. A history-making helping hand. Coming up, the robot helping surgeons perform a delicate operation. There's breaking news out of British Columbia tonight. In a major reversal, the province is heeding the growing calls to amend its pilot program on drug decriminalization. That pilot project began back in January 2023 and meant that people caught with small amounts of illicit drugs in public could not be arrested or charged. The province faced criticism from politicians and community groups upset about drug use in public spaces. Police will now be able to make arrests, but only in exceptional circumstances.
That compassion, that concern for people who are struggling, does not mean that anything goes. We still have expectations around safety in public spaces, in the coffee shop, on the bus, in the park, on the beach.
And the changes will not recriminalize drug use in private homes or at overdose prevention sites. Well, it's being described as GPS for spine surgery, a first-of-its-kind Canadian medical success story. Dave Mine needed spinal surgery to correct a degenerative condition. Now, normally that procedure requires 2 surgeries. But with the help of a robot, Toronto neurosurgeons were able to carry out a delicate operation more quickly and with less recovery time. Catherine Ward explains.
Throughout his life, Dave Mine has been a man on the move.
Loved to hike, mountain bike, was starting to golf, and all of that came to an abrupt end.
Back pain and sciatica hit hard in February 2023 because of a degenerative condition in Dave's spine.
It was unbearable, and it was to the point where I couldn't stand on my own 2 legs.
The painful situation, however, took a unique turn a year later, as Dave became the first Canadian to receive a minimally invasive direct lateral procedure on his spine, with the help of a robot and a highly trained team. Neurosurgeon Dr. Victor Young explains.
the surgeons are actually performing the procedure. The robot guides us to the correct location and it maintains the trajectory for us. So it is a bit like having a GPS, but also allowing to guide you to the right location.
Without a robot, the surgery would need to be done in 2 sessions with a much longer recovery time.
We'll be able to do the procedure with the patient in one single position. And so this reduces the time the patient's under anesthesia and improves the patient care afterwards.
Dave said he felt better immediately.
The moment I woke up, the pain that had been running down my right leg was completely gone instantly.
Dr. Young says going forward, this kind of technology has an important role to play and potential to be used for more complex procedures.
It's like turning us from carpenters into engineers, that we can have more and more consistent results.
Dave is about a third of the way through the recovery process and says he's able to dream about his future once again.
I was in quite a predicament, and I'm very relieved.
Catherine Ward, Global News, Toronto.
The great critical minerals race. Still ahead, the scramble to secure key components for Canada's new electric vehicle plants. Welcome back. Honda's $15 billion plan to build new electric vehicle plants in Ontario is re-energizing Canada's auto industry. But mining critical minerals is key to the sector's success. Canada has been hailed as one of the most promising places for battery supply chains. But as Mike Drolet reports, there's a long road ahead.
Toronto-based Electra started reconfiguring this Northern Ontario refinery in 2022 into the only North American cobalt processing facility. At the time, it had no local customers, and all of its refined cobalt was destined to be shipped overseas. But Canada's auto landscape has changed over the past 2 years, creating newfound opportunity.
Yeah, the demand is definitely outweighing our ability to produce within North America, and there's high demand for material that is produced with more than 80% of the world's cobalt coming out of refineries in China. There's quite a bit of demand for material that's coming outside of China.
While most of the auto industry focus remains on manufacturing, the other half of the supply equation, mining critical minerals, is only now starting to take shape.
And I would tell you that there is enormous progress. There's a new lithium mine that's operating in Quebec. There's another one that has just been approved. There are several others that are actually moving through. That is also true of graphite. That is true of copper. That is true of rare earths.
And automakers are going to great lengths to secure their share. Just yesterday, Mitsubishi closed a deal to own part of Frontier Lithium's Ontario mine. And while Mitsubishi isn't building a battery plant in Ontario, its EV strategic partner Honda is.
It's a lot of it is security of supply, to be honest, because
so it's a minerals race.
It is.
For all the demand, smaller companies like Electra are having difficulty raising funds to complete their projects. With 80% of its refined cobalt supply already spoken for by LG, they don't have much left to leverage.
Conversations are a little bit more strategic now on who we're going to partner with in terms of that last offtake.
The automotive sector may need the manufacturing plants, but a Canadian supply chain needs companies like Electra. Mike Drolet, Global News, Toronto.
Spirit horse celebration. Up next, why there's new hope for a rare breed. Welcome back. An orca calf that spent more than a month stranded in a remote lagoon on Vancouver Island is now free. The Aamjiwnaang First Nation says the orphaned calf made its way over a sandbar with the help of high tide, and rescuers are now trying to encourage the orca towards the open ocean, where her calls may be heard by her pod. There are also increased patrols and protective measures to ensure the whale avoids contact with boats and people. An Ottawa farm is celebrating a rare event, the birth of a new Ojibway spirit horse. Now, most horse breeds register tens of thousands of new births every year, but the Ojibway Horse Society gets excited if there are a dozen foals born in a year, and estimate there are only about 200 of those horses in the world. Abigail Beeman tells us more about these special animals.
Meet Asema. His name means tobacco, named for one of 4 Indigenous sacred medicines, like his mom, sweetgrass. Born last month to the delight of Ottawa's Madawaki Farm.
Our elders' teachings tell us that they lived in connection with our communities since time immemorial. So, you know, these ponies were here and living in the forest prior to colonization. Hi.
Even though she's been in both the equestrian and Indigenous cultural tourism worlds for years, Trina Simard only learned about Ojibway spirit horses during the pandemic and then went on a mission, growing the number on her farm to 9.
They do have an extra nose flap in here to keep out all of the cold weather.
The breed, also known as the Lac La Croix Indigenous pony, has several attributes that help in the Canadian winter, such as hairy ears and a thick layer of hair under the mane. They also have a telltale dorsal stripe and friendly nature.
The horses really suffered from the effects of colonization.
News of the new foal has spread wide in the small but dedicated spirit horse community in North America. The breed was once considered a nuisance or health hazard for roaming freely, hunted until there were just 4 mares left in the 1970s who were spirited away to the U.S. in a movie-like plot.
Hey, you.
Today, volunteers work hard to grow the numbers of the people-loving little horses.
We only have about 25 breeding stallions in the entire breed and about 60 to 70 mares, so it's perilous, honestly.
There you go, buddy.
For now, there is simply joy watching this foal explore his new world.
I just think he's going to be a really special boy, and, you know, maybe he'll continue to be a stud or a stallion and, you know, be part of bringing future generations forward.
Simard hopes of a future where the Ojibway spirit horse can roam wild again, happy to play a small role in rebuilding the special breed and inviting the public to her farm to learn more. Abigail Beeman, Global News, Ottawa.
And that is Global National for this Friday. I'm Jeff Semple. Tonight's Your Canada is the fields of Giroux, Manitoba. Thanks for watching. Have a great night.